Hello and welcome to Reanimated. My name's Stuart. I'm in California. With me is H.A. Conrad. Hello.
Hello.
And you are in the New York
Metro area, yes.
borough of Brooklyn. Or you are, right? Or you haven't moved?
I am. One would think it was January here, but it's been like almost 70 degrees the last 2 days. So it is a little weird right now. Just saying.
I just watched, speaking of New York and weird weather, Day After Tomorrow. It's on HBO right now.
Oh, it's so funny you said that because I was actually thinking about that the other day. Maybe it's because we were watching the last particular episode of this. Yep.
The march through the snow, definitely.
Yeah.
But that movie came out in 2003.
I know, it's a long time, right?
It has not aged particularly well.
I have not seen it in a long time, but it was kind of terrible when it came out, but I kind of want to see it again just because it's kind of funny. But
it is actually more comical than anything else now, especially the CGI wolves.
I was just talking about the wolves that take over Manhattan after 24 hours of snow.
Yeah. The timeline is a little hard to figure out, but it hasn't been that long.
Dire wolves take over Manhattan within, a small amount of time of weather coming in. But anyway.
Jake Gyllenhaal looks like a child. Of course, it was 17 years ago. So.
He was a child. Was a child. So anyway.
It's just crazy. I thought that movie came out more recently, but that's quite old, and it's showing its age a little bit. Either way, we're not here to talk about The Day After Tomorrow, although we do like apocalypse stories. So
we do.
But let's at least talk about the news that we have before us, which today is a fair amount. Number one on the list is Gimple has been out talking to people for the first time in a while. And you may or may not remember that Scott Gimple is the story overlord for the Walking Dead universe of moving picture shows. He is like the showrunner to beat all showrunners. So Angela Kang reports to him. Chambliss and Goldberg, to my chagrin, report to him. And is it Satrazemis who's running the new show?
Yeah, I think so.
And whoever it is who's the showrunner for the new show is also reporting to him. And so he came out and talked about the new movies, or if they're ever coming out. He talked about the movies, and he talked about some concerns about oversaturation in two articles that we found.
But as much as he came out and was talking, he really did not say all that much.
He is a master at that.
He's really good at doing that. So he was definitely out there and talking to an enormous number of people, but really not giving away any new information for the most part. Nothing that was new to us anyway, because I feel like some of this stuff we've talked about. And so he just kind of skirts around all the major questions, so that's fine.
So the money quote from the IO9 article, the Gizmodo article, where he talks about Rick in the movies, is we're going to continue to tell Rick's story. We're going to discover so much of the world through that story. I'm hoping he means capital W world. I've said this before. I want them to go overseas. I'm still listening to the audiobook Typhoon, which is set in China, in Kirkman's universe. So clearly they're thinking about it, but whether or not the movie is going to go there, we'll find out.
Yeah. And I do think, I think it's going to have to be enough of an explanation for why Rick has not come back. It's because there has to be some, and it could be that whatever group he's with has sort of abandoned him overseas or something like that. And that's always, I was like, okay, that would make sense, because it has to be something like that, because you can't imagine that he would ever leave his kid or Michonne for something other than that. So I feel like they have to do something along those lines, because it feels like he can't be in the continental United States, right?
I mean, in a way, they're potentially setting him up for an Odyssey type storyline, like that fight to get home, like they kind of recreated in Cold Mountain, Jude Law with Nicole Kidman, an Odyssey from France back to the U.S. with some stops along the way. I think that could make for a hugely interesting story. Plus, it has some roots in some good old Homer, which you can't beat.
Correct. So we'll see what happens there. Still not a big timeline on not a really distinct timeline on when to expect any of this.
No.
So that was also his masterful vagueness was in full effect. But hopefully, I would love to see these. So we'll get to these eventually. But still the fact that he's even talking about it is always kind of fun. So.
Yeah.
Um,
No timeline. And what was the other thing that you?
Oh, the other thing was like part of the him being out and talking about this is that basically comic book resources came out with this thing that the Walking Dead creators aren't afraid to saturate the market. No kidding. And they talk a
Yeah,
little bit.
you
They
heard it
talk.
here first.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and then again they talk to Gimple, and one of the things they talk about is the World Beyond, which is the new series coming out, which he actually describes a little bit like a Stand By Me esque kind of story,
Okay.
which is it's kind of interesting with the kids going out and having some kind of a adventure and
Are they
odyssey
going to
as
find a dead
well.
body on the train tracks?
Or many dead bodies, I suppose.
I would assume they're going to see more than
Undead
one.
bodies. So it's just kind of funny that he's out there. I just thought it was funny in tandem with the article that you found, like just how much he doesn't really say. But basically, I mean, it's sort of echoing what we had talked about last time, which is that there's going to be multiple shows in this world this coming year. So stay tuned.
Well, one potentially interesting thing I'm just seeing in this article is the world beyond is set 10 years after the beginning of the outbreak. And I
Hmm.
don't think we're there in The Walking Dead Prime yet. I think we might be between 7 and 8 years. So
Okay. Yeah.
that is
Um,
interesting.
And as a total aside, I don't know if you saw this news that Robert Kirkman is actually coming out with yet another comic book series, totally not related to this, called Firepower. It's a graphic novel that's supposed to come out in April, and the premise is that there's like it's got some like main character who is trying to find how to do the lost art of throwing fireballs, apparently to save the world. So we'll stay tuned for that too, and have more info on that later. Um, no mention of zombies in that one though. So
Yeah, I don't think he's going to go back to that well.
oh, I don't think so either. I'm
He
just
doesn't
being.
want to
I
oversaturate
know. He
the
does
comic
not.
book world with Walking Dead, that's for sure.
I just thought it seems like he's been very busy. That's all.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
So there is a new book out that's very I don't know. It's a little bit similar to the Max Brooks book ish, apparently, according to people that are reviewing it. And the author is Brian Hall, and basically took a little bit of that the Max Brooks magic with World War Z and his guide, that the zombie survival guide, and put it into this. It's basically a philosophy book, sort of like The Good Place. So it explores different scenarios in a post-apocalyptic world with zombies, with like examples and things like that. And it looks kind of cool. And he definitely apparently tries to build the world and scenarios in a way that are kind of funny. But the philosophy piece of it is very serious. So and real. So I'll take a look at it. I think it has a lot of illustrations and things like that from what he's saying. So worth checking out. So we'll keep an eye on that.
I'm sure you just like the art for this article.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And so, but maybe we'll check this out later. Maybe it's worth reviewing if it would, but I'm just not sure how much how much we could review it versus just noting it as we are doing now. And lastly, in serious news, but somewhat of a positive follow up to one of the things we talked about last time, is that the virus in China that they had been tracking that was being described as SARS like, the pneumonia type illness that it seemed to be spreading and they were quite concerned about. They have now been able to map it and have determined that it's a coronavirus. But unlike some other viruses of this nature, apparently it is a little bit more difficult, like human to human spreading, like infection has not been as high as they were concerned about initially. And it seems like it started out in a seafood market, though they aren't totally positive about the source. So not looking like SARS, not looking like MERS at this point, though I think one person has so far died, but definitely not sort of the pandemic-like situation that they were concerned about, which is why they had put so many things into place when people started becoming infected with this. That said, I mean, 50 people is nothing to sneeze at, haha. But still a better case scenario than you and I had initially been worried about. So I'm glad to hear that. I mean, MERS out there is still like 30% of the people who get infected by it die, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So this is not so far not showing, and it's showing that people are recovering from it, which is also a positive thing. So hopefully it does not mutate. So knock on wood, and let's hope it goes away.
For sure. Good news.
Yep. All right, you ready to jump into the final couple episodes from season 9 of The Walking Dead?
Let's do it.
We have got The Calm Before and The Storm. The Calm Before, directed by Laura Belzi, and written by Geraldine Noah and Channing Powell. And then The Storm, directed by the one and only Greg Nicotero, and written by Angela Kang and Matthew Negrete.
We never can
We
tell.
never know, but anyway.
I think it's
Negrete. So anyway, why don't we kick it off?
The Calm Before. I mean, these titles they're accurate, and yet they're also misleading.
Yes.
The Calm Before is definitely anything but calm. Maybe you could say that the episode ends with this calamity, but everything up to it is okay and kind of calm. So maybe. But
maybe.
This is what's also interesting is just the structure of these two episodes in the course of the whole episode of the season. We've talked before about how Angela Kang has kind of thrown out the paradigm of Walking Dead build to a mid-season finale, which is sometimes underwhelming, and then build to a climactic final episode. Like that was right. The Savior's arc over and over again for like 3 seasons, and it was honestly tiresome, right?
Yep.
For me, and I assume for other fans too. But Angela Kang has stopped doing that. She put a 6-year time jump in the mid-season finale, right? And then continued that time jump after the mid-season break. So she is a free thinker. She's outside the box. And so I think these 2 episodes continue to show that, because in The Calm Before, that is technically a season ender type episode.
Yep. I will also admit that it had been, there'd been some time before I had watched these. Somehow in my head, I felt like we had more episodes, so I totally forgot that this was coming. I mean, I knew it was coming, but I just didn't. I felt like there was like one episode somehow between what happened at the end of this episode. I just totally forgot that was what was happening at the end of this particular episode. I guess maybe because we are used to that whole formula. In my head, I thought this was the finale because it felt kind of like the finale. Or like what a finale would normally feel like with The Walking Dead. So anyway, I was just like, oh yeah, I forgot that this happened in this one, and how odd. So just not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that it accomplishes surprising and did surprise the audience when it first came out. So where we left off the last time is that we've got the communities all gathering together for their trade fair at the Kingdom, and it's initially we see Carol, and she's planning to go out after get Henry basically, but doesn't have to do that because they all show up. Michonne, Henry, Daryl, and Connie,
yeah,
and then we've got a lot of stuff going on.
And Lydia is with them too, obviously.
Right, and Lydia, of course. And then we've got the communities banding together, and talking through different things. And I did like how they're working through some of the issues that had been there, and they're trying to put that stuff to rest with the new threat of the Whisperers. And it's interesting because Lydia poses a very difficult problem for them, but it's sort of like all of them have been in that position before, as the outsider, as the person not trusted. And I guess you could say that they are being naive for wanting to take her in, or for agreeing to take her in, but they're not, because they talk through it, and they know that it's a risk in sheltering her. But Michonne, of all people, who has been the most isolationist in terms of these kinds of issues, has basically said, I even tried to get her to leave, and she wouldn't, and we're gonna let her we're gonna let her be part of our community. It just and it's interesting just hearing them talk through this, knowing the risks that they're putting their communities at, because the Whisperers are definitely a big threat. So, but decide to band together. And the one thing that they say is, like, if one community is attacked, we're all attacked. So this is a solidarity that we have not seen, that they've been splintered throughout the entire season, and now they are united.
Well, they're all in the same room for the first time, also in a long time. The Tara Michonne makeup scene, which that's one thing I'd never really believed or felt like I never really understood or felt, in capital F, this rift between Michonne and Tara, but why she left Alexandria. I know on paper why, but I never understood why there was like beef between them.
Yeah.
And why Tara had addressed Michonne with some contempt when she showed up at Hilltop at the beginning of the season. This makeup scene, it feels good. Sure, I like it when people make up, and I like Tara and I like Michonne, but I'm still like, what? And she's like, yeah, I might have taken a few extra things when I left, and I'm sorry, and you were right. No, you were right. Oh, okay, let's all fist bump. And
but did you notice that everybody else is hugging? Michonne is definitely not a hugger. She's just like fist bumping all over the place, or a solid handshake, but no hugging for Michonne. None.
Good.
Except Judith. Judith gets hugs from Michonne. She's the only one. But yeah, no, I agree with you. We get a little bit of that backstory throughout the season, but I think you're correct in that they never fully explain why that rift is so rifty, I guess.
It's so rifty. And it doesn't seem like Michonne even had any idea that Tara had stolen a bunch of medicine and the Constitution. So it feels like all the beef was on Tara's side, and she was the one who did the most harm. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense to me. No. But also, like, hey, guess what? We got over it, because that was obviously what had to happen, and so it's fine now. What do you think about the all grown up juvenile delinquent from Oceanside now being the leader of Oceanside?
Well, I mean, I think was her grandmother, right?
Like, why did this girl become the leader of Oceanside? Why isn't it Sydney?
Well, true, but
is she
I don't
dead?
know.
Sydney's not dead, is she?
I didn't think so, but maybe it's just because she was the heir apparent. Who knows? And maybe because she's Sydney would have been recognizable too, though. But who knows?
Sydney or the short-haired woman, but they were kind of behind the plot to assassinate all the saviors, and so maybe that might had an awakening of consciousness and be like, oh wow, we totally undid the youthful community that we had.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe not.
It's good to see the at least show the solidarity. The fair gets underway. There's also the cold open was actually showing this couple from Hilltop.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually how they started. And it actually was pretty good storytelling. And it's
considering it's done in no time.
It's done really quickly. It's a couple we don't know anything about, or haven't really known that much about. And they basically had found their way to Hilltop. The wife and the couple basically made the little amulets, the one that Henry gives to Lydia, the little H for Hilltop.
Or Hilda.
Or Hilda. Or whatever it is. Miles is the husband in this little couple, and there's just a lot of hopefulness with this couple, and they are on their way to the trade fair, but they are a day or so behind the rest of the Hilltoppers. So They're going to go sell their little cool wooden H's, and they get totally destroyed by the whispers, and it's pretty brutal because you don't even see the battle, you just see the aftermath, because the woman Hilda is so recognizable because of her hair.
Yeah.
And
And we hear Alpha singing her creepy song about
yeah,
Lydia, and I'm always like, what rhymes with Lydia? I don't
I
understand the
know.
lyrics to this song because it's
Well,
almost always chlamydia.
yeah, true. But she uses the woman's hair as a disguise wig, basically. But let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, Alpha is manages to somehow clean herself up really well, but then gets super dirty and ground in again really quickly. It's a little bit confusing. I don't know.
There is a scene where she, at the barn, very end of the episode, where she doesn't have all the grime on her face.
Yeah,
And
but
she's back in her whisper clothes. So I think they do make some effort. What I don't understand is without a mirror, how does she clean herself up enough to become
right,
Debbie from
right.
Alexandria?
Right,
But
and
she
her
does.
and her hands too, because her hands are pretty gross,
Yeah.
generally. But anyway, I thought that was a really cool storytelling piece because they did it so quickly. It was a
Yeah.
nice little bit of let's get them into this. It told the tale and tied it everything together pretty well. So I thought that was great.
It did, especially since they fit it all in before the cold, during the
Yeah,
cold open before the credits. I was like, okay, props.
right. But we got the trade fair going on. We got the planning happening because Hilltop's in danger because of the rescue of Lydia and Henry. And so the discussion is that after this pact has been made between the communities to go and protect Hilltop. I do feel like it's a weird decision to send basically all of your best fighters to Hilltop and leaving. I mean, you've definitely got some people left behind in Kingdom that are good fighters, but it feels a little concerning that they're sending so many of their best fighters to Hilltop. I don't know. What did you think about that? Because I was even at the time, I'm like, oh, this is not going to end well.
There's
Um,
no there's no intel that they know that the Whispers know about the kingdom,
right,
but they should assume it. I
right,
don't know. Yeah, I think there's a legitimate fear that the Whisperers were going to retaliate, and
yeah,
they were just there's no way to figure this one out because Alpha turns out to be too wily for all of them.
right. But then, okay, but then when you have your group of best fighters go out, the decision to divide makes no sense to me. So that doesn't, even if your people might be alive, you know what the whispers are, and it doesn't, and you don't yet know what's waiting at Hilltop. To me, it would just seemed like kind of crazy to go after them in the way that they did. So, and again, it's Daryl, Michonne, is
Carol.
it Carol and Yubiko?
Yeah.
And it just seems like a bad decision and one that I don't really think Carol and Daryl especially would make, nor Michonne for that matter. So
Yeah.
it just seems like those three characters would never make that decision.
Yeah.
But that's just, me.
There's a lot of moving parts. When you take a step, we don't even have to take a step back. This episode has a lot of moving parts
Yep.
because you also have the highwaymen out there
Yep.
roving around, and they interact with them before they decide to move off. And then, yeah, the rest of their caravan continues on to Hilltop. But the highwaymen also say we're going to stay out here doing our patrols, and that comes into play
Yep.
at the end of the episode.
Yep.
So there are just lots of people traveling
Yep.
around in this area right now.
Yeah.
So for me, the hardest thing for me to get my head around is how the Whisperers pull off abducting, and it is an abduction. They don't murder these people.
Yeah.
They abduct this many people from the kingdom during. I
And
mean, maybe during the event it's harder to tell, but this is a walled place.
yeah, also, let's just talk about the Whispers for a moment. They're not the most, I mean, maybe Alpha has the ability to blend. She seems the most capable and wily, as you said, out of this group. The rest of them do not seem this savvy. I don't buy for a second that they would be able to infiltrate in the way that they did, clearly. And not just that, but some of the people that they take are not people that would be easy to take. I don't think for a second that Tara would be easy or honestly like
Henry.
almost Henry, basically Enid. All these people are well versed in the things that they have to do, and I just don't. Um, and then the other part is just sort of where they all were in the sort of group of people in the kingdom. They were amongst like big groups of people. Other people who cared about them were looking out for them. I mean, Henry did go to fix the pipe, so maybe he could have been isolated. But really, it just felt very um, it felt a little too convenient, and I just don't think that these whisperers have like the Daryl skill set in order to infiltrate and take people that silently. That's
And
all.
it's 100% a mirror image of Daryl's, what he did to them. He
Yeah.
beat them at their own game. So then the Whisperers come in, infiltrate the community, nobody knows, and then they take 10 people. Well,
Right.
actually, they took 7, and then nobody's the wiser.
Right.
Yeah, very difficult to. And they did this with zero notice, right?
Right.
They killed that wagon of people the same day as they showed up in the kingdom, I
Yeah.
assume is the timeline, because then
Yeah, it has to be because
the highwaymen find the wagon, and it's all happening that day.
right.
And then they find the wagon, kill the people, somehow infiltrate the community. There has to be more than just Alpha. There have to be, I don't know, 10
At
Whisperers.
least.
And then take them out, take them to the barn, do what they do, then intercept
Right.
our heroes, then do the big reveal, and by then it's dawn the next day. But still,
Yeah.
like, there's no time for this to come together, and it goes off apparently perfectly for the
Right.
Whisperers. And
Not,
so,
not to
you know.
mention Alpha's like in there in the kingdom, walking around in her gross wig. She confronts Ezekiel, and by the like, she was being so super creepy. I cannot imagine that he wouldn't have been like, sure, I'll show you where this stuff is, and then I'm going to find out who the heck you are because you're being super weird. Like her behavior, I think, no matter how optimistic Ezekiel is, would have tipped him off that something's up with this lady.
Oh, when she talks about the winter?
Yeah, like totally. So,
Like,
and
oh,
I don't think
Jesus.
he's stupid. I think he's optimistic, but I don't think Ezekiel's stupid. And
I mean, if she had a mustache, she would be twirling it as she's
correct.
talking to him.
So
know?
that was, and then of course, just to add on to the evil, she's got to go and like sit next to Lydia in the theater, and
Which is after dark,
yes,
right? The
and
movie
so-
is at, so that even shortens the timeline even more. I mean, she still
Right.
has some hours to get back and do all the bad business, but still.
Yeah, and she twirls her mustache all at Lydia, and Lydia basically is like, "No, I'm not having any of it." And so she
But they
has
also leave the theater together
Yeah,
to
yeah.
have this conversation by the dumpster. And I don't know why.
anybody would
Why
have
didn't
like,
Lydia raise the alarm in the theater?
Well, I think she was scared and she was probably surprised. Also, I like of all people, I think Lydia knows that there's a reason why Henry's absent, and so I think maybe that was part of it. But, but also I think somebody would have noticed her leaving the theater because the movie was such a special thing. It would be weird for people to be leaving before it was over. So that also was a little bit, but all that aside, I still felt like this was a very well done. The big reveal at the end was a big reveal. I will admit, when I first saw this, I think you and I had seen or heard some spoilers indicating a little bit of this. And for anybody who reads the comics, there was a similar scene, but it included Ezekiel as one of the victims. So I thought at some point while watching this episode the first time, I was like, I wonder, because, and they maybe tried to tease the audience a little bit with that when Ezekiel walks her to the clothing thing. So there is some concern that it might have been him until the end, or at least for me there was. But I just thought they pretty much pulled it off, though, despite some of these criticisms.
Yeah.
What did you think the first time you watched it?
I was shocked. I mean, it's designed
So
to be
what?
shocking. Just
Yeah.
it's almost just because of the number. 10 people is a huge number.
Right. And actually, when I was first watching this, when we have the splinter group of Michonne, Carol, Daryl, and Yumiko go off to search everybody, I was like, they're never gonna get. Like, I thought that Yumi was gonna be the sort of like victim here because I'm like, oh, they're never going to get rid of those three, so that's why she went with them so that they could kill her off. Like that was my instinct the first time I saw it, and then I
Mm.
wasn't fully prepared for the end of it, and couldn't believe that they did what they did. So, yeah, and I would say that if anybody doubted that there was going to be a battle between Carol and Alpha, that last like reveal was just like what?
Honestly, at that point, she's just crushed.
Yeah.
It's a tough scene. It's a tough episode. Partially because of all the we've had some good times in the last couple episodes. And
Yeah.
at the beginning of this episode, with the compact getting signed, there's more like back patting and
Yeah.
handshakes and hugs, and you're like, oh, this is nice. But it's also the calm before, so something's gonna go wrong. But to
Yeah.
what extent? And like they did a clearinghouse, and that's great because I think that Fear the Walking Dead needs to do this too, and we've talked
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, the one character I mean, like, actually, the two characters, I kind of thought that Henry was going to get it all throughout this season, um, because you have to do something like that, I think. I thought Henry or Ezekiel, something's got to do something with Carol's character. But I was very surprised at Tara and Enid, mainly because they've been on the show for so long. But Tara, especially, has come into her own, and it feels like really horrible that Hilltop has lost not one, but now two leaders.
In a
And
short period of time. Yeah.
yeah, and she really had come into her own, and I liked seeing her in that role and being this great leader that had stepped into these shoes and even was doing that before Jesus died. And so I admit that was the one that was most shocking to me. But I'll also admit that the dead head of Tara didn't totally look like Tara to me. So it took me a moment when the
Mm-hmm.
first time I saw this to realize that it was her. Because everybody else was pretty recognizable, and I don't know why she wasn't to me. But initially, I didn't get it that Tara had died
Okay. I think I
until
recognize them all.
they showed the flashback and they show her fighting. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was Tara.
That was one part of the reveal that I didn't love was the flashback to the
Yeah,
kingdom. Have you seen so and so? Tell her I'd like
yeah,
to speak with her.
yeah.
There were just three of those. I think partially to remind you that oh, Frankie's up there because nobody knows who Frankie is anymore, right? Despite the
Right,
fact that she had a few lines an episode or two ago. You bet
right.
this is the redhead. They're not like. Remember seeing Negan's ex-wife around? No, they don't have to do
Yeah,
that. But yeah, so they had to remind people who people were like, oh, here's Addie and other guy like
yeah.
bully number two.
But that's probably
Um,
also why they showed them in the beginning because you had to
yes,
sort of get that.
you have to
And
be
then
reminded that these are
I did.
the delinquents from Hilltop.
I will also point out that Tammy's disappearance I feel would have been noticed a lot earlier.
Yeah,
Just because she's taking
like
care of the
she's
baby.
like she's gonna disappear from the baby. I know Earl has the baby when they have the "Where's Tammy" scene, but what? Maybe she went to the bathroom, and just the whisperers were in the plumbing. They were in the
I guess.
bathrooms.
Again, it just seems a little implausible. Plus, we know Tammy's got a pretty loud like Tammy's pretty loud. Like I
Yeah,
just the whole thing felt a
again, yeah, with
little
with the getting people out of there unseen completely hard to believe. But take a step back and look at who they took. The first three that we get revealed, and the order in which they're revealed is also interesting, right? It's like
yeah.
the first
The
three they reveal
highwaymen.
Highwaymen and DJ, who's a reformed savior.
Yep.
So, like, hope,
Yep.
basically.
Yep.
Oh, bad guys can be reformed and become good guys. This is great. We need these guys.
Nope.
Then I think it's the kids. No, it's
Yep.
Tammy and the kids. And
Yep.
so they take out, yeah, Tammy, who has become a semi-regular guest on the show and is kind of important. And, and then it's the kids. It's the two teenagers, I believe,
Yep.
from Hilltop, Addie, and some guy, forget his name. It's on here somewhere. Rodney. Oh, and
Okay.
Frankie actually was also for Tammy.
Yep.
And then they show Enid, who is another, to me, she's like a teenager. So they've
Yep.
taken out three kids, and then Tara, and then Henry.
Yeah.
And those are just mostly for the emotional effect. I think when you go from Enid, Tara, Henry, you're just like, what?
Yeah.
No, no, no. It's, so they build up to that
Yeah.
crescendo. And Daryl and Carol's little scene with the heads also just punches you with
Oh, it's
him.
terrible.
Look
Terrible.
at me instead.
Yep.
But yeah, the people that they chose to take they didn't take like the most important people. They didn't cut the head off the community. They
Right.
took people who I think would inflict pain.
Right.
And the obviously the highwaymen and DJ were opportunity targets. They were not sought out in the community. And then maybe there's an argument that they only took people who fell into their little trap by accident. And it just happened to be all characters that we know, you know?
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, I mean, I thought it was a well done episode. Again, it was like this somehow in my head was the next episode, but that's not how it was. And all I was thinking the first time I watched this was like how bad it was going to be for Lydia, which in some ways this was deliberate. I mean, it was deliberate taking Henry. I think they definitely planned, and I think there were a few of these that were planned because of the role, like for example, Tammy with the whisper baby, Henry because of Lydia. Like there's a couple.
How would they know that that's the Whisperer baby?
Well, I mean, the Alpha definitely recognizes the kid or sees her carrying it, and they had seen Tammy running with the baby when they rescued him from the walkers. But anyway, I definitely think there was some significance to a few of the people that they took, and some maybe were just opportunistic.
Yeah. And then finally, my other kind of question, and I'm not trying to pick this episode apart. I think it's super strong, has a great punch, kind of gut punch effect. But why would they not kill, when they have them, Daryl, Carol, Michonne, and Yumiko?
And they've got a gripe with Daryl. I mean, of all people, Daryl is...
And Beta's the one who captures him.
Right.
And,
like
when you have that reveal that Beta's still alive and Daryl looks over his shoulder like, oh dear.
Yeah, like how did that happen?
Whoops, I guess I shouldn't have just spat on his body. I should have finished him off.
Yep. But how he would have done that is another question.
Well, get Connie with the slingshot. Could have just...
I guess.
That's one way to do it.
But, yeah, no, that would have made sense for them to kill off because it's clear that they're some of the best fighters. I think they know that. So that
they
seemed
literally
weird...
are the best fighters.
Right.
Left.
So it's kind of a weird decision to let them go. But Alpha also, she wants her territory. She shows Daryl like all the horde that they put together, and that's how she is so nasty about her big reveal. And Daryl, I mean, of course, they do a little bit of a double fake because you think that maybe it's Lydia up there because Alpha keeps talking about Lydia in the past tense, and then it's clear that it's not. And so in some ways I think that part of the reason is because Alpha is a little evil and just she thinks she's got the upper hand, so maybe it's her having some hubris there.
It's also she's managing some sort. Well, you haven't seen season 10, I can tell. Also,
no, I have not.
Hey, every time I talk to you, you're like, I've
well,
got time.
okay, so no. But part of why I wanted to wait was because I knew that we had these last episodes to wrap up, and I have a habit of blending seasons.
Oh, yes.
So I didn't want to do that before.
So I don't want to go into spoilers, but there is a lot of context in this season, in this episode, and this season that comes into play in season 10, and because the Savior story continues. And so a lot of what she's saying about Lydia is in front of other whisperers.
That makes sense.
And there is a reason for why she's talking that way, and that definitely has a part to play in season 10.
Well, I'm assuming that she told people that she killed Lydia, but
I will let you watch the.
But there's also this moment where she cries, and Beta gives her time alone, and she waits to cry until he's gone.
That poor guy.
And then she kills off some whisperer that just randomly walks up with a dead crow. But why he's walking up to her, who knows? Anyway.
Well, he's walking past. I mean, they're in their camp. He just took a wrong turn at Albuquerque and was looking at her when she had a tear on her face. This is a problem for me. How do Alpha maintain a posse when she's just murdering her people who she supposedly is supposed to keep safe? You know,
right.
there's a disconnect there, 100%. So didn't love that. I mean, it just underscores that she's a big bad. We get it. She just murdered 10 people.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I think ready to jump into the next one. The only thing I'll say is that, Sadiq basically does the sort of wrap up at the end of this episode where he's like, they meant for us to tear each other apart, but let's band together as communities. And it does seem like that's what's happening when we jump to the next episode. And there's been a time leap between the
Yeah.
the penultimate episode of the season
The ultimate.
and the season
Yeah.
between the penultimate and the finale.
Yeah. Unknown amount of time, but enough time for Kingdom to have like burned down.
Right.
Like in that final scene when Ezekiel's riding out of the kingdom, there's like every building has fire damage, and you're like, wait a second,
what happened?
Why? And maybe it's the Whisperers pulling some ops, but I don't know.
Well, we do know that the kingdom had been dealing with a lot of issues before this. There'd been discussion between Ezekiel and Carol and also Henry about how the pipes and the boilers, all that stuff was falling apart. So maybe it was to do with that. But here's the thing. In this episode, we see that stuff kind of happening and coming to a head. But they already knew that this was going to happen. So I really, again, not to be critical, but if you've got to move that many people and winter's coming and this stuff is happening, why not do it? Then you wouldn't have snow zombies. I know. But still, it just seems like a tactical mistake that I just don't think Ezekiel and Carol would make. But maybe they are in denial and they're grieving because of Henry, so they're less on the ball in terms of this kind of stuff. But it just felt like a strange thing. So
yeah,
in
I
any
think
case,
this decision was just made at the last minute. I can see where Ezekiel's coming from. He waited, he delayed to make this decision, and then when he did, yeah, it was a little late. But it was just odd that so much damage has happened. And it's also a little odd to pin your community's survival on pipes.
Yeah.
Like none of the pipes in any of these communities are going to live forever.
No.
So I don't know. I think, but it's definitely that plus the fact that none of them seem to have roofs anymore because they're
Right.
all burned.
Right.
Which is just like he talks about fires raged in his like voiceover.
Right, but they don't really
But
explain
we
why.
don't understand. No, because that seems more of a significant threat than pipes failing to me.
But in any case, the kingdom's done, and they're getting their people out all to take them to Hilltop because Hilltop's agreed to take them in. So they're coming together to basically move these people out with an impending blizzard hitting. And they're trekking through. At first, they're staying along the territorial lines and staying out of the Whisperer territory, and oddly enough, end up in the where Negan, we had seen Negan prior to this sanctuary.
Sanctuary, yeah.
And it's still like a mess. And then they all, as a community, have to make this decision to take the risk to go into Whisperer territory. And it's an I do like the debate because Ezekiel's really worried about them starting a war with the Whisperers. We've all seen how that's turned out. They don't want to lose more people. But basically everybody else is like, yeah, but if we don't do this, it could be weeks. Everybody's going to die. So they have to basically make this decision to try to get everybody across the frozen river to the next spot.
In a post snowplow America, this would be a big deal for sure.
And given the winter storm and whatever, we do have some snow zombies. Some are frozen like icicles, some are not. It's unclear to me why some are and some are not.
I feel like Nicotero just wanted to do two different kinds of snow zombie. But I feel like you can't have one. You can't have one and the other. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have under snow zombies that emerge like creepy blue zombies, right, and icicle zombies.
Well, my only thought is that snow insulates, so maybe they're more mobile because they do have a little bit more of that like the temperature's a little bit higher, and the ones that have been standing are have the wind going around them and the water content has frozen. That's my guess.
But they're not. They don't have body heat. So it's not like it's insulating and building off of their own. Like they should be all icicles or all.
Agreed. And then there's the icicle kill, which is pretty awesome.
That's just obligatory. Yeah,
of course you're gonna have to do it. And while we have this trek going, we do get some exposition about what's been happening since the last episode during this time jump. Lydia's in a bad way because she's mourning Henry. She's definitely odd man out at the camp. The only person that seems to really have her back is Daryl.
And Alden even is being a dick to her.
Yeah, because he
He's
lost...
not a dick to people.
I know. So we've got her feeling pretty isolated and definitely as if she's not part of the community, that she's also like she's a pariah basically. And
she tries to kill herself.
Yep, frozen zombie kill by death by frozen zombie. And I did think it was interesting because they did make that frozen zombie look very close to what Beta looks like, which I thought was interesting. And Carol kind of sees her but doesn't comment, so she's like stops doing it, and then there's a second scene where Carol basically she doesn't totally confront her, but Lydia basically asks Carol to kill her, and Carol basically comes to her senses or comes to some kind of a conclusion.
Almost kills her, seems
almost
like.
Does.
She's definitely thinking about it.
But I think part of it's because not Enid, Lydia says something about Henry, that Henry said she was a good person, that Lydia was a good person, and also that Alpha said that Lydia was weak. And I think those are the two pieces that really turn Carol on this part, and they come out of the woods in a better spot for themselves anyway. The sad part of this is all the weird stuff between her and Ezekiel. And I do think that makes sense because when people lose a child, often there is it's hard. It's hard for people to get past that, and sometimes it splinters a relationship. And this was there was a lot of sad moments with that, I thought. And, Carol...
Well, the worst is when she gives him back the ring. And
so
he tries to, and his face, great acting by Carrie Payton. Yep. He's just you don't often see the king mad.
But there's also, there's stuff with them, because the king tries to ask Daryl to leave because he thinks that Daryl's possibly causing the rift. And Daryl isn't. I mean, although, look,
in the previous episode, Ezekiel tells Daryl, "You're welcome to come and live in the kingdom full time." It's very quick to come to that point.
Right, but Henry's still alive then.
Yeah.
So we just see the damage that these losses have done, and it makes me very sad for Ezekiel and for Carol actually. And Daryl doesn't quite know what to do. He's trying to help his friend, but he really just doesn't know what to do. He does try to sort of talk positively about Lydia to Carol, and basically says, "You don't blame me, do you?" And she's like, "No." And so that was a sad little piece. And in addition, but eventually these they get through the Whisper territory and they get safely to the next way station. And in Alexandria, we've got all sorts of stuff going on. Similarly, they are dealing with the blizzard. There's not a ton of heat, so they have little stations set up where there are big fireplaces, and this gives them a reason to get Negan out of prison. So I thought that was kind of a cool idea.
There was some good dialogue between, or at least it was entertaining, between Eugene, Rosita, Gabriel, Negan. Those are kind of fun. And then we get a chance for Negan to redeem himself by going after Judith, who's going after Dog.
Yep.
And so nice. I want to see Negan get redeemed, even though it's kind of hard to believe. But enough time has passed in the story's timeline that, I would think that he could be, a new man.
Yeah,
but he's still going to have fun at people's expenses. That's just what.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's really giving Rosita, Eugene, Gabriel, and Sadiq a really hard time. And he just he's always going to be a smartass, and so there's that. But saving Judith, and he is very sweet with Judith, and their whole thing is pretty cute. And he does get a little bit of acknowledgement of that from Michonne, and so she definitely acknowledges the debt there. And so I thought that was an interesting exchange between them. Very different from the first time they were with each other. We've seen them in the season with each other, so that was cool. And And what else? Was there anything else in this?
There's a final scene with the Whisperers. Like it's like
that's right.
the spring has come or something, or maybe they're just down south. And Beta and Alpha are talking, and he's like, "The break was good for us. Like we're on vacation." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure that you had a really good time living in the woods in another part of America. Congratulations." And then he lashes her with a stick, like she used to do to her daughter, I guess. Yeah. And then at the very end is Ezekiel's talking to Judith about kind of like a hopeful message of we might go back to the kingdom one day, and just because we lost our house doesn't mean we're homeless. And then he leaves the room and the radio comes alive and there's a woman's voice saying, transmitting on a live channel.
Right.
And that's the end of the season. And people, I think there was a lot of speculation for that radio signal at the time, as I recall, that maybe Fear the Walking Dead was something that they were thinking, or maybe it's Maggie. So there's still some questions about who that voice was on the radio.
Yeah. But now I will catch up now that we have this laid to rest. But I really enjoyed this season. I thought that it was a great, it was a breath of fresh air after some of the prior seasons.
Good grief. Yeah.
And so much happened within it. So I have to give thumbs up to this season. I liked it a lot.
Thumbs up to Angela Kang. I feel like I've said this a few times already this season. She was the difference maker because every other ingredient was the same cast. Well, they brought in a few more people, but still, mostly the cast is the same. The writers are the same writers. The directors are the same pool of directors. But the difference was the showrunner, and it made a huge impact. And yes, definitely the best season in 6 years. I don't know, like in an absurd
I think so.
amount of time.
I would say yes to that, and agree. I think it's all her, and she should get all the accolades for the success of this season. So what would you like to talk about next week?
So I think it's time for us to review Zomboat.
Okay. I'm game. Do you want to do all episodes at once, or what do you want to do? Two at a time?
What is it? There's 6 total, did I say?
Yeah. Yep, and each are 25 minutes.
Let's do two podcast episodes of 3, maybe.
Okay,
that work
fair.
For you?
Yep, that works for me.
And so, yeah, next time we will get together and review Zomboat. It's a show that's on Hulu. It's a fairly short, limited series. I don't know if it's going to go beyond that, but it's UK, boats, zombies, daughters, no big whoop. All right.
Great. So thanks everyone for listening. If you'd like to leave us a note or ask a question, send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can get us on the Twitters, reanimatedpcast is the handle, or you can leave a note on our site, reanimatedpodcast.com. And until next time, ciao.
Thanks for listening, and bye.